this video, I'm going to show you how to make API calls inside the form. In the example I'm going to show you, it's a form where we enter a VIN number and then we make an API call using that entered VIN number to check against a database, and in the return what we get is the year, make, and model that the vehicle was built in. So in this form, you'll see I have this Manage API Calls button. That appears because in the form settings here, we have this toggle enabled for enabling API calls in the form. So going back to the form builder, I have a field right here for VIN. It's just a text field. We'll go to Manage API Calls. Now first, to make an API call, we need to make a connection to a system. So here, you'll see there's Manage API Connections, and then down below we have Manage API Calls. To make a call, you first need to have a connection, and you'll choose the connection you want to use. So if you hit Create API Connection, all you need to do is authenticate, give it a name, choose the type. So let's say just for Sales CRM, which is the Indition Sales CRM, all you would need to do is put in your username and password and then set up the connection. So I already have the connection set up in this form, so I won't do that. Then down below, once you have a connection, you're going to make an API call. So in this scenario, I already have the API call for this VIN field. But if you were to create one, you could hit Create API Call, give the call a name, choose that connection that we're using, enter the API URL that you're going to use, choose the request method, and then down below, you're going to create your API request. So give the data name, and then down here, you can choose the data value that you're sending there. So in this scenario, I would be doing something like VIN. My API call would already be the VIN lookup. I would say VIN, and then I can choose the actual entered VIN in here. And I would just choose the VIN field. And if anything else is required, then you can just add more, add more, add more. Now on the response for your API call, you're going to have the response structured however it is from the system you're using, and you're going to be able to map that response. So in my scenario, I would send the VIN in my request, I would get back the year of the vehicle, I would get back the make of the vehicle, and I would get back the model of the vehicle. So what I would be able to do is then map that. So for year, I would map that to my year field. Make, map that to my make field, and so on. And you can do that however you need in your API call. This lets you give a little success criteria. Failure, if there is a failure, you can do a specific failure message to the users of the form. And then you can also give a timeout once you consider it a failed request. So again, I already have this set up, so I'm not actually going to create this. I'm going to go back to API management here. And so now at this point, we have our API connection. We have the VIN lookup call, the API call that I'm going to make inside of the field or inside of the form. Now I just need to set up when to make this call. And that's what you're going to see in this API call trigger listing. So what I want to do is I want to say, to create a new one, you're going to add an API call trigger. You're going to choose that API call that you want to use, and then you want to choose the method for triggering that. So in this scenario, I'm going to do VIN, Here, if you want to validate using an API call, essentially in this scenario, let's say I need to make sure that the VIN entered matches a VIN in our database. I can do so by hitting require successful call. Otherwise, if all you're going to do is make this API call, and if it's successful, great, we get some information back. If not, then that does not stop the user from continuing or anything. Then you don't need to require a successful call. So in this scenario, I don't need it. All I'm going to do is basically pre-populate the year, make, and model fields for these users if it's successful. And if you want to trigger multiple API calls, you can. You just hit add API call, and then you'll do multiple calls at the same exact time here. Now I want to choose when I'm triggering this call to be made. We have 4 different options. You can do it on click of a button included, and what's going to happen is this button would be right next to the field. You can customize that button slightly, or you can do it on click of the submit button, so that's on click of the submit button for the form. You can do it on click of continue or back button if you have a multi-step form design. So if you're going to the next step, you can basically say make this API call when going to the next step. If you actually have it required, we can stop people from going to the next step until there's a successful call. And then you can do it on exit of field. So let's say they just typed in their VIN and then they click on or leave that field or click on the next field. Anytime they exit that current VIN field, then we'd make that call. So again, I already have this set up. I'm not actually going to create this, but you can see here that we have a VIN update field or trigger, and we do it on click of a button beside it. So I can click on this and show you real fast. This is the call we make. And you can see that we chose our VIN update call. We're doing it on click of a button. The field we're using is the VIN field in the form. You can choose your button text. So in our example, we did validate VIN. And then we choose where we want to put this button where we triggered a call. And then down below we have a little preview. So essentially the user would type in the VIN for the vehicle, then they hit validate, and we'd make the API call, and based on the configured API call, we get a response, and in our response, we map these values to the year, make, and model field. And that is how we set up an API call to be made inside of a form. This is separate from making an API call after a form is submitted. At this point, in the way I just showed you how to set this up, we are making an API call before the form is ever submitted successfully. So this allows you to make calls out to external systems, and you can use it for validation. You can use it to, let's say, look up, if you have a CRM system and you already have the address information and contact information for somebody filling out your forms, you could look that up based on, entered email address, that sort of thing. All right, so I hope this helps you out, and thank you for using Indition.